I recreated this black and white, clean, minimalist style, and it has that really smooth and aesthetic feel. So let me show you exactly how you can do it as well. We're going to start off with the words research and understanding your target audience.
Research and understanding your target audience is
So right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a marker so that we later on know where to switch to a different style animation or a different animation, basically. So next, I'm just going to create a new white solid. This is going to function as the background. So let me rename this to background. And now I'm going to introduce the icons. So first one is going to be research. Let me scale it down a bit and position it in the left side of the screen. Now, the target icon, let me scale it down again so that it's similar size to the research icon. And I'm going to position it on the right side on the screen. Okay. Now I'm going to introduce a new text layer. Okay. Let me make it black. And let me scale it up real quick right here. And now let's make sure to select a font that's going to, have that nice aesthetic style, partly as those handwritten, partly old style. That's the thing we're aiming for, okay? And now let's make sure that the first letter of the word research is capital right here. So let me change it real quick, okay? Let me position it below here. Now, same for the word audience, okay? I'm just going to copy those parameters, scale it up, and I'm going to make the first letter of that word capital. Now, we're going to select both of those words. Okay, let me bring them slightly beneath the icons right here. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to start introducing the animation for the text. So word ramp up, blur. And now what we're going to do is we're going to adjust those keyframes right here. So in the range selector 1, you've got 2 keyframes. Let's bring them closer to each other. And in this case, the first word is going to start off right at the beginning of the animation. And we're going to switch to based on words to based on characters so that each character pops up really nicely so that it looks really clean. And same for the word audience, same story right here. Adjust those keyframes, but they're going to be later on in the animation.
target audience.
Now we're going to animate the icons themselves. So we're going to introduce this nice slide-in effect with a bit of opacity so that they show up from, it's like slide up from bottom and sort of show up gradually.
Understanding your target audience.
Something like this looks great. Okay. I'm just going to make sure that those keyframes are easy ease and I'm going to bring them slightly a bit together.
Research and understanding.
Now we're going to introduce the keyframes for the word target right here. So the first keyframe is going to be right here. Let's move it out. Now it's going to go down. Same story right here. Let's bring it down. Now the opacity change. So set it to 0. Move out a few keyframes. Set it to 100. Nice. Now easy ease those keyframes. Easy ease those. And now if you take a look at this, let's just move it out right here.
Research and understanding your target audience.
Now we're going to introduce a new camera right here. And we're going to introduce a new null object so that we will be able to control the camera. Let's connect the camera to the camera control null. And now what we're going to do is we're going to introduce a position change so that the camera goes up. Now let's make sure that there's no black background visible. So we're going to align the movement of the background to the movement of the camera right here. Okay. Boom. Okay, nice. Quick reminder for you guys, you can grab today's After Effects project file we're working on just by following the instructions in the pinned comment down below. Check it out. And now using the pen tool, I'm going to introduce 2 lines. Both of them will lead towards a point above the icons, okay? The first line is going to be heading from the research icon, and then we're going to duplicate that line, and we're going to flip it horizontally, and it's going to go from the audience, the target audience icon, okay? They're going to be super thin, only 3 pixels of stroke, okay? And after that, I'm just going to introduce a trim path. So at the beginning, before the camera movement gets introduced, the line won't exist, but it will gradually show up once the camera moves. So we're going to introduce the trim path right here on the first line, and we're going to introduce the trim path right here on the second line. I'm just going to paste in the graph values right here, and we're going to do the same thing with the trim path on the second line. Same exact story. Boom, and set it to 100. Okay, paste in those values, and now it's going to be super smooth. Now, one more thing we're going to do in order to make those lines look really aesthetic is we're just going to introduce a bit of taper, and we're going to, set the start length to 20%, and then the end length same story. And we're going to do the same exact thing for the second line. So round cap, make the start length 20 and the second end length 35%. That's going to make them really smooth and really thin. Now I'm going to introduce an exclamation mark sign, and it's basically going to symbolize the word important. So let's make sure that that layer is a 3D object. Let's bring it up above the words research and audience so that, the lines lead to the icon that symbolizes importance. Now I'm just going to use opacity keyframes in order to create this blinking effect as though it's genuinely important. And now we're going to introduce camera movement. So we're going to move the camera up towards that sign, and the same thing needs to happen with the background right here. So we zoom in, and the background also needs to fill up with that white color. There cannot be any black visible. Okay. And now let's just bring that important icon up a bit because it's a bit. Now I'm just going to introduce a scaled down animation for the exclamation mark sign right here. Okay. Now I'm just going to use the ellipse tool in order to create a circular object. It's going to be entirely filled with the color black, and it's going to have no stroke whatsoever. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is I'm just going to make sure that that ellipse is centered. On top of that ellipse, I'm going to introduce a video editor icon or a content creator icon. I'm just going to label the circle and the content creator icon in the exact same color so that we exactly know which one is which. And let's make sure that those two objects are 3D. But now, since they're 3D, they're going to be positioned lower. So we need to bring them up towards the top part of our composition since the camera is adjusted, right? And next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that the video editor icon is white. So I'm just going to use the fill function. And what we're going to do is now we're just going to center the video editor icon so that it's aligned with the circles in the middle of the circle, right? Scale it up, move it a bit. Okay. Maybe a bit to the left. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to scale it down to 0 and then scale it up so that, the important icon scales down, and then this new icon bounces up so that they sort of swap. Now we're going to create another ellipse, and these are just going to be circles. So we're just going to introduce a bunch of circles, okay? And those circles will just function as a network around our video editor right here. So we're just going to introduce trim paths for all of these circles. They have no fill, they just have a stroke. So let me just keyframe the trim paths right here. So each circle shows up one after another. Trim path here, and then trim path there. Boom, move them out, adjust them in time.
To attract clients.
Nice. Okay. And now we want to attract clients. So somewhere around in certain areas of that circle, of all of these circles, actually, we want to introduce client icons. So clients, we want to keep them in similar styles, so black and white. Let's just make the icon white and the circle black. And let's just treat this as our sort of pre-composed layer that's going to symbolize client. Okay. And now we're just going to move it out around these circles randomly. So this client can be positioned right here. Scale them down. Okay. Now let's just duplicate this a bunch of times. And let's make sure that clients pop up everywhere in different scales around the circles. So here, right here, right here. Okay. And now take a look. But the clients have no animation whatsoever. So we need to make sure that they pop up in that same style. And we're going to select those keyframes. We're going to make sure that they bounce up really nicely. So I'm just going to use the bouncer plugin right here. And we're going to apply those bouncer keyframes right here so that it really nicely bounces up. We're going to delay those keyframes so that each of them bounces up in a bit of a different time. And boom, nice. Now, I think we're pretty much done with the client icons. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start introducing some shadows. So let's introduce a bit of shadow behind the words and the text in order to give that black and white classic style vibe or feel. Okay, that makes it look a bit 3D, if that makes sense. Now, boom. Now let's add that shadow to the important icon. Still going to add some depth to it. And then same story right here. Let's just add it to all the clients and let's add it to the video editor himself.
Research and understanding your target audience is the most important thing for every video editor who wants to attract clients.
And that's exactly how you create this smooth black and white aesthetic animation style. Trust me, it looks really premium and professional despite being quite simple to create in my opinion. Smash that like button if you want more tutorials like these, and make sure to check out this video if it seems potentially interesting or valuable to you. See you in the next one.